We live in a world that is changing rapidly, very fast. And we can't respond the way that we always have been able to in the past. So we're being challenged on every level, and humanity is suffering. You know, when I say humanity is suffering, it's like we don't know where to turn, and spirituality's become big business. So there's lots of tools available to us: teachers, teachings, technologies, all sorts of things. But it's a bit like a spiritual supermarket. And you know, in the past, these teachings were regarded as sacred, and they were passed down from master to student, in a very personal way, where we had a lot of guidance. So how do we serve this awakening without being caught in spiritual materialism, without really going into an ego identification with it? Because, you know, almost everybody wants a quick fix. They just want their life to be fixed. They think there's an end to their suffering. And you know, when they want a quick fix, they think, oh, well, if I found the perfect partner, if I found the dream job, if I could create a happy family, if I can be prosperous, then I'm going to be happy. And then there's a stage beyond that where you start to think about yourself, and you start to think, well, maybe I need to fix myself, and then I'll be happy. So there's this search to correct something, but actually there's nothing wrong with you. It's just to be able to drop some of the things you're holding on to and come inside. It's an inner journey we're on, and it will reflect in our outer journey. So it is helpful to have a teacher, to have teachings, to have guidance. But it's not helpful if you're just out there spiritual shopping. The spiritual path is an inner journey. If you can see your path laid out in front of you, step by step, it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path. This inner journey, it's a deepening into self. So we go through personal transitions. These are pivotal points where we're challenged to really grow. When I first started teaching in China, I was blessed to meet a tea lady, and she was a master of the tea. And so over this time, I really understood the subtlety of tea making and what an art it is, and how in a way everything becomes a meditation. And it was maybe about 6 years before this, before I was in China, that I went through a major transition. It was a life-changing moment. And it was precipitated by my youngest daughter, Daisy. She became very ill overnight, and we thought we were going to lose her. And in that time when she was between life and death, I had an enormous amount of fear and grief. And yet there was something behind that in me, some stillness, peaceful place where I could feel her spirit and her angelic essence. And I knew that I had to trust and let her go. And I did that. And, you know, she recovered. I don't mean that what I did made her recover, but somehow there was something there that she allowed her to come through, because I think every time we go into a crisis, there's a lesson for everybody involved in that crisis. And for me, it was being able to let her go. It was like, you know, this changed me forever, because I felt this presence, what I would now call pure awareness, that surrounds everything. And whatever happens in your life, there's a background to it which holds you. And I could feel this so potently when I thought she was leaving. My life changed in ways that I never could have imagined, actually. It was very confronting. My marriage ended after over 30 years, and I decided to close my business, and I started to really investigate different spiritual teachings and teachers and started to teach Kundalini yoga. And I then started to travel and teach a lot. I became a teacher and a trainer. At that time, my life really went into a flow. It started to flow very simply, and I felt like I'd let so many things go. I lived out of a suitcase for maybe 8 years, traveling constantly and teaching. And sometimes I would be on retreat for up to 10 weeks at a time and working with a lot of students in many different countries. Almost all of them were not speaking English. So I was working with translators, and I learned so much from that because, I couldn't go into all the normal conversation, but somehow I understood, and somehow the students understood me. And I formed some very close connections with people, especially in China and Taiwan and Israel, where I spent most of my time. And we could communicate in ways that you wouldn't expect. And my teaching changed because I needed to speak and then wait. I learned just to be in that flow and to trust and to let the words that were there come. It was an enormous gift for me to have these experiences over this time and to still feel the support of my family. When you go through a transition, there's always an adjustment after it. It's, with every expansion, there's a contraction. So there's a contraction point and you will be tested. And then after the test comes a gift. You're shown the gift that lives within you. So I'm going to set up for the tea ceremony, and tea is a very big part of life in China, and it's a subtle part because it's really a meditative process and sharing. And I've learned so much through this process of making tea and serving and sharing tea. And one of my students very carefully chose this tea set for me, so I feel very honored to be able to use it and to recognize the subtlety of this practice. Working in China and Israel has been very insightful to me, very, very special time actually. The people of these countries have really had so much suffering. In China and the Cultural Revolution, I think about maybe 6 million people starved to death. I mean, it's incredible. So food is very, very important to them. And I've never seen a Chinese person eating on the street. And in Israel, it's similar, the Holocaust, that they were such a displaced people. They've also had this suffering that goes beyond description. And yet working with them, I find that, it's given me so much because they have an enormous sense of their own inner strength. So this tea that I'm going to pour today, it was given to me by a Beijing student, and it's organic, it's young organic tea, it's white tea. And so what we do, we take the tea, we put it in the teapot, and then we take our water and we pour the water to the side. So we don't pour directly onto the tea, we pour to the side. The tea gets rinsed. And then normally we would actually do this and wash the cups with this tea first, but I'm going to pour it straight because this is very good tea. So then you tip it from one to the other like this. What I found when I lived in China was that there's so many people there. Sometimes it's absolutely chaotic. If you go into the market and the street, especially in Shanghai where I was based, it's completely chaotic. And yet underneath that, it's like there's an ocean underneath it of stillness and timelessness. And this is what the tea reminds me of, because it takes you into a meditative state, but outside your room, the chaos is still there. The really great spiritual teachers, if you think of the Buddha, if you think of Guru Nanak, They were on the ground. They were right in life. They were walking with humanity. There was no separation. There was no high or low. And I found that I learned to be able to be in very chaotic places and I was fine. And it's almost like our consciousness, we can live in a chaotic world and it's dynamic and it's exciting and it's always fresh if we open our eyes to it. And underneath it is this stillness that's always there, that the chaos plays in. And this is consciousness. There's a pure awareness within each one of us that is timeless, beyond time and space, and within it plays life. So how can we separate them? It's like the form arises out of the formless and drops back into it, and this is a continual play. And if we get caught in trying to hold on to the form, hold on to our self, hold on to our identity, our roles, our money, whatever we're holding on to, then we can't feel this stillness and subtlety that's underneath. We lose track of it, and in that way we lose track of ourselves. It was some years later, I was teaching and traveling most of the time, and a woman teacher, not a Kundalini yoga teacher, told me that I was in spiritual bypass. I was really shocked. I thought I was doing very well, and basically she said to me that I was in bypass, which really means in avoidance of something, Spiritual bypass is part of the path. It's when we identify with being spiritual and what we'd like that to be, rather than being able to be our whole self. So we may want to act in a pure way, a good way, a spiritual way, and we reject the parts of ourselves that we don't regard as spiritual. So we're still not seeing the parts of ourselves that we can't accept. In a way, I was in my spiritual journey, in avoidance of my spiritual journey, and this led me to some really deep questioning. I didn't realize for a long time the gift of this. I was frustrated and I was angry and I was upset and I was doubting myself. And, it was as if, yes, I was a teacher, but I hadn't actually embodied being a teacher. I was identifying with being a teacher. And there's such a big difference, I've since learnt. Authentic awakening is not about a role. It's not about being anything. It's simply about anchoring into the light of awareness. I see this a lot in our communities when we really want to be a good teacher and it becomes competitive and judgmental and all those things. And our teaching might be really flowing and things are going very well, but underneath we have a sort of a self-doubt about what we're doing and why. And there's many questions to be asked. And I think what she meant by me being in spiritual bypass was that I was living as a teacher, but I hadn't actually processed some of my old pain. So I still had a lot of emotions there that I hadn't really learnt how to be with and how to flow with. So can you get to know your pain instead of running away from it? There's pain and pleasure, and they're rarely just polarities, and they move in and out. When one's there, the other's waiting. So if you feel something as pain, you can feel it in your body, feel where it is in your body, and feel the sensation of it. And at the same time, feel the space around it. And as you feel both these states, you'll find that the pain will dissolve into the space, because the space that holds everything is a space of pure awareness, and that's who you really are. And so I went into quite a long period of deeply questioning. I questioned my teacher, I questioned the teachings, I questioned everything. I questioned the root of myself, and I started to see patterns that were so deep that I couldn't have seen them before anyway. And then I realized from this that there's a flow to our journey. It's not needing to get somewhere. It's It's actually being in it. And by bypassing, I was stepping out of it continually. I felt quite stuck with this. I couldn't find a way forward. And so at the end of 2017, I had an amazing opportunity to go up into the mountain of Zhongnanshan, right in the heart of China. I came here because I knew that many masters have meditated here, sometimes lived here for their whole life in caves for thousands of years. I went there and I was able to do a solo silent retreat there for 7 days. So it was really no food and quiet and not much movement and no books, nothing. And I sat with myself for those 7 days. You know, most of the time we run away from ourselves because we're so afraid of feeling this loneliness within. So the first thing is to get to know the feeling of it, to actually accept it. And then you will find that underneath that loneliness, there is aloneness. And this is a very different quality. Aloneness, it means all one. So when you break through that loneliness, which is a sense of coming from lack, if you break through the form into the formless, all one, you're part of all existence. You hold everything within you. You are complete. You can be alone and you can be in a state of pure awareness. But when you're lonely, you're lacking something and you're in pain. In the process of being in that dark hole, the black hole, I had to go completely into my fear, into my loneliness, into my fear, into my core pain. You know, every part of my being wanted to step out of it. And I needed to stay with it. And I knew I needed to stay with it. Otherwise I would never shift out of this mental cage I was living in. And I stayed in it, and I stayed in it, and I stayed in it. And suddenly it burst open. It just burst open. And all of that was gone. And I could just feel this stillness and space inside me. It's always there inside all of us. And we only need to accept it and love. It's love. It's just like a field of pure love that all our movements sit in. So if you can feel this pure awareness, the state of pure awareness, it can be always there with you. And everything else is just being painted on that canvas of life. So this experience, when I came out of it, I didn't really know what had happened. But my life has been so different ever since. And I feel that now I am a teacher. But it's not that I am a teacher or I'm not a teacher, because it's simply embodied in me. It's just part of me. It doesn't ever need to be said. And I feel this spontaneity and openness to life where I've let go of many of the conditions that were there in the past. And I don't know what the future is for me or for humanity. But I feel open to experience it, to experience this moment and every moment that comes beyond this moment, to experience it in its fullness and to allow it to touch me and to allow it to express itself through me. And this, I believe, is the grace. Early morning in Shanghai. The birds are stirring. Street life is stirring. It's cold in the street. Cold on my face. The woman sweeping the road. She looks at me direct in the eye. We smile at each other. We know each other.